With the success of Resident Evil 7, it's apparent that this is the new direction for the series going forward. Resident Evil 7 shares many similarities with the original game, but let's not forget what made this series so great in the first place. The original game did so well, in fact, that it spawned 6 sequels, not to mention numerous spin-offs. It also spawned 6 movies. At one point I thought they would never stop making these movies. There was one just about every other year it seemed like, but with the most recent one being titled The Final Chapter, I'm guessing that's where that ends. As of this year, it's Capcom's largest selling franchise, from games to CG and live-action movies. Resident Evil created such a legacy for itself. It coined the term survival horror and created many of the staples for the genre. And with that, I want to take a look back at the original game and talk about what really made Resident Evil so great. 1998. I'll never forget it. It was the year I saw Resident Evil for the first time. My cousin had just got a PlayStation and was playing Resident Evil Director's Cut. He had just made it to the infamous scene with the first zombie. Yeah, I left the room. You had never seen anything like it at the time. This scene alone gave me nightmares and kept me from ever playing the game until a few years later. No! Don't go! I'll go ahead and tell you very briefly what the first Resident Evil is. You're part of Raccoon City's police department. There are bizarre cases popping up of people being attacked by monsters near the forest outside of the city. You lose contact with the first team sent in to investigate, and now you are part of the team being sent in to look for them. You find part of the first team in the forest, dead, and you're then chased into a scary mansion nearby. Pretty fitting for a game called Resident Evil. And we've come full circle.
Run for that house!
Part of your team gets split up during the dash for the mansion, and that's where you enter the world of survival horror. You have the choice of playing one of 2 characters, Chris or Jill. Each have their advantages and disadvantages. Chris is the strongest of the 2, but starts with the knife. Jill is weaker, but starts with both a knife and a gun and can carry 2 more items at a time than Chris. This is only the beginning of the massive amounts of replay value Resident Evil has to offer, especially for its time. The ability to play one of 2 separate characters, each with their own branching paths, is one of my favorite features from the original game. The only other game from the main series to have separate campaigns was Resident Evil 2. Oh, and that game deserves its own video in due time. Both characters will find important items in different places than the other, and, usually Chris, require alternate, more tedious ways to proceed.
Ah, it's the Moonlight Sonata.
What really sets these characters apart is the partner character that accompanies each. This is where Chris and Jill's stories begin to branch out. Chris's partner, Rebecca, is the sole survivor of Bravo Team, the team sent in before you. Depending on how you interact with and respond to her will determine how Chris's story plays out. Perhaps you fight a giant venomous snake and it incapacitates you.
Am I poisoned?
If you told Rebecca yes when asked to come with you, she becomes a playable character during this event and you rush to find and deliver a serum to Chris.
Oh, Barry!
Jill's partner, Barry, is one of the main reasons why I always choose Jill. 1, she's pretty. And 2, Barry is the man.
I have this.
He's constantly giving Jill health and ammo, sometimes littering save rooms with helpful items, and writing love notes. He may screw up once or twice, but hey, everyone makes mistakes.
I'm sorry, Jill.
There are so many different endings for the game, and each are dependent on how you interact with Rebecca and Barry. And these partner characters, you end up really caring for them as much as you do Chris or Jill. They always come at the right time and know exactly what to say.
You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
Man, I love you, Barry.
Yeah.
The first Resident Evil scared me, but everything scared me at that age. There was no way I was gonna add the game to my already small collection of games. Now, I was like a lot of kids out there. If it wasn't your birthday or Christmas, you were lucky to get a new game. And if you were done with the game, you could have that after school or during school meetup with a friend where you would trade a game for a game. And then that kid moves away without you knowing, and then you're stuck with Xena, Warrior Princess on PlayStation 1. Alright, as a kid, you get bored with the games you have and you'll play anything you can get your hands on. Alright, that's... Somehow I fought through that initial fear I had with the game. A friend lent it to me and I booted it up on my PlayStation, probably in broad daylight. I made it to the scene with the first zombie and I nearly turned the game off. But I didn't. Instead, I tried to play. And that's when I presented the zombie with my baby back ribs. So, this is one of the biggest complaints people have with the old Resident Evil games. The tank controls. Pressing the up button on the controller will always move your character forward in the direction they're facing. It doesn't matter where your character is on screen. Pressing the left button will pivot them left, while the right pivots them right. Tank controls. This is one of the most important aspects of the game, and it plays a major role in how the game makes the player feel, along with the atmosphere, the setting, the music, the tension, the feeling it gives the player. You're trapped in a mansion with the undead. You and your character have never experienced anything like what they're seeing. It's unsettling. You have no idea what's waiting for you on the other side of that door, around that corner. Zombie dogs start busting through the windows, you're headed straight for the nearest door. Any wrong move and you clip the side of a table, it could be the end of you. Have you ever had those dreams where something's chasing you and you're running as fast as you can, but your fastest just isn't enough? It feels like you're running through quicksand and you're stumbling off your feet and that thing that's chasing you is breathing right down your neck. The tank controls from the original Resident Evil captures that feeling so well. Capcom wanted the game to feel much like a horror movie. You had no control of the game's camera and you're left to navigate relying on the fixed camera angles. A lot of times you can't outright see what's chasing you or what's in the room with you. These camera angles shift as you move throughout the mansion. With the aid of tank controls, rest assured that your character will always be moving forward and not back the way they came. In newer Resident Evil games, coming around a corner isn't nearly as frightening as it should be. You're allowed to look around freely and it kills a lot of the suspense. The more time that goes on, the more opportunity the player has to psych themselves out. A lot of games now have so much going on or they happen so quickly that they don't allow the moment to sink in. Having control of the camera gives the player the ability to cheat, versus only seeing what the game allows you to see and chancing a corner that you can't peek around. That's not to say that the newer games don't have their fair share of scares. It's not that the game is outdated. It's not a flaw in the game's design. It's the way this game is meant to be played. It allows tension to build, forces you to commit, and makes it terrifying when you finally do take that leap of faith. Having a gun doesn't mean you're safe. You could be caught by surprise. You may not be able to fire. You could miss very easily. You could run out of ammo completely or need to reload your gun at the worst possible time. Fighting isn't always the answer or even always an option. In a narrow corridor, you can get by without wasting a single item. You can wait to spot an opening to make your escape or bait a zombie towards a flight of stairs and run around them. Running and avoiding enemies altogether is a great way to conserve items. You never want to be stuck in the situation where you have no ammo or close to death and have just made it to an area surrounded by monsters and have nowhere to go. The game makes it clear that your items should be used very wisely. In this game, your character's trapped in a terrifying scenario surrounded by imminent death, but you as the player knows that if the worst happens and they die, you can magically restore their life simply by reloading the last save file. Great! So how then do you truly immerse the player to make them share your character's fears? Well, how about you limit those saves? You must first find an ink ribbon, an item found in only limited quantities throughout the game. Due to its rarity, you're reluctant to use them for fear of not finding more, and this adds an essential layer to this survival horror. Ink ribbons give the player a reason to fear death. No one wants to be an hour in, low on health and ammo, and unable to go back the way they came. But you know what? That happens in these games. It gives these games a more realistic approach. You're forced to use what you currently have to make it out alive. There are times when you just can't catch a break, and every new room you enter is its own horror. You're in a bad spot, and you know that even the tiniest scratch from anything will be the end of you. And you open the next door, hoping for it to be a safe place to find health and ammo, and you hear that soothing music from a save room. You've made it. In a save room, you know that you're safe. There's a lot of atmospheric music throughout the game, but a lot of rooms in the mansion remain silent. It allows tension to build when you enter a brand new area and all you can hear are your own footsteps. And then the footsteps of the dead. When music does play, it sets the mood. The music that plays in save rooms is eerie yet soothing. They're among the best music you'll hear in the series. No one save room is bad, they're always safe. A lot of times you'll find helpful items inside, and most importantly, you can save your progress and plan out your next trek. And this music enforces that feeling these rooms give to the player. You'll hear it and immediately feel at ease. This game scared the hell out of me, but it was the way the game forced me to survive and the way the game rewarded me for fighting through those hopeless situations that helped me conquer those fears. And now, it's one of my favorite series of all time. I mean, it's had its ups and downs as of late. Oh. What? In many later Resident Evil games, puzzles, or lack thereof, have taken a back seat. And it's a shame. The puzzles in the original do a fantastic job of making you solve them with the constant fear of, what if I mess up? You could be attacked. You could be poisoned. You could die. As far as survival horrors go, Resident Evil introduced the concept of requiring you to combine items together or examine items in order to come up with a solution. Examining specific parts of an item can be helpful for knowing where and when an item can be used. It's a major survival horror staple, and you have Resident Evil to thank for that. I've got to give it to the level design in this game. You'll eventually travel through different areas outside of the mansion. The backtracking is so brilliantly done, and it does a great job of never letting you feel too familiar with an area for too long. You'll find important items that you can use in different locations of the estate, like a key for the mansion long after you've explored outside. Making your way back to the mansion, you'll enter areas that were once safe, only to find that there are now completely different enemies all throughout the mansion, and this happens more frequently as you play through the game. You'll also find scattered notes and files throughout. To me, this is one of the most enjoyable parts of Resident Evil. Taking the time to read them can give you insight on what to do and how to progress. You'll also find journal entries left behind by residents of the mansion who witnessed the fall of the estate, and some of them are pretty disturbing. For example, you can find a journal of a man who was infected. His initial entries are coherent and thorough, but as his infection progresses, his writings become increasingly broken. You're ambushed by a zombie in his room immediately after reading. Not shoving backstory into the player's face and leaving it up to them to hunt down and find can be one of the most satisfying ways to experience a story. You can take away as much as you want. It doesn't feel forced, and when you want to know everything, you're driven to put all the pieces together yourself, instead of having everything force-fed to you in a single document near the end of the game. I mean, I'm not pointing anything out in particular, but...
Don't scare me.
That's what I was going to say.
One of the other most enjoyable parts of Resident Evil has got to be the voice acting. Oh, it's acting, it's just not good.
Oh my God.
It's awful.
It really is the definition of good bad.
Gnadab.
Barry, help me please. The door won't open. Quick!
The bad voice acting is definitely not intentional, and all of the scenes are meant to be completely serious, but it's easy to forget with scenes like this.
Oh, Jill, this house is dangerous. There are terrible demons. Ouch!
There's a certain charm to it that you can't help but love, and the original would just not be the same without it.
Is that Jill?
Is that voice Enrico's?
Yeah?
You're alive! Enrico!
If you haven't played a traditional Resident Evil game, give it a shot. And if horror games aren't really your thing and you've never played one before, grab some friends. It's always more fun being scared together. The remaster of the original is probably the best to start with, and you don't have to look far for a copy. They've added a lot of fun and interesting segments, and the game is absolutely gorgeous. The graphics hold up so well, and it goes without saying that it's my favorite remake of all time. Well, with that said, the original Resident Evil will always have a special place in my heart. And when you're playing other survival horror games out there like Silent Hill, Amnesia, or Five Nights, you have the very first Resident Evil to thank. Here's hoping that we see a return to traditional Resident Evil in the future. Fingers crossed that the upcoming Resident Evil 2 remake is good. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you again soon. Keep it breezy, and have a radical day. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and all that jam. If you like what you see and you want to stay updated, all it takes is a click. Feel free to subscribe. You can like and comment, tell your friends. Thanks for watching. How's it going?
I am Turok.